What happens when a power-hungry cop crosses paths with a woman who outranks him in every way that truly matters? It was a calm Wednesday night in a town called Riverbend. The streets were quiet. Most people were inside their homes, maybe eating dinner, watching TV, or getting ready for bed. Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter was driving back from a long meeting at a military base 2 hours away. She wore her neat army uniform and drove a black government SUV. It was late, but she wasn't tired. She was used to long hours. After all, she had been in the military for over 20 years. As she drove, she followed all the rules. Her hands were on the wheel. Her seatbelt was fastened. She didn't drive too fast or too slow. She didn't swerve or do anything strange. She just wanted to get home safely. But about 10 minutes away from her house, a police car, hidden on the side of the road, turned on its flashing lights behind her. Simone saw the lights and calmly pulled over. The police officer's name was Sergeant David Reynolds. He was sitting in his patrol car, sipping cold coffee and scrolling through his phone. His shift had been very boring. No accidents, no calls, nothing to do. When he saw Simone's SUV drive by, he didn't recognize the car. He got curious. He didn't know who was inside. Maybe he just wanted something to do. So without much thought, he turned on his lights and followed her. Even though she had done nothing wrong, he pulled her over. Simone was not afraid. She had dealt with danger before, much worse than this. She rolled down her window and kept her hands on the steering wheel so he could see them. Sergeant Reynolds walked up to the car. He had a flashlight in one hand, and the other hand rested on his belt, close to his gun. He didn't say hello or good evening. He didn't smile. He just said in a loud voice, "License and registration." Simone looked at him calmly. She said, "Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped?" The officer frowned and said, "You were drifting between lanes, might be drunk." Simone shook her head gently and said, "I haven't been drinking." But Reynolds didn't seem to care. He just repeated, louder this time, "License and registration." Simone moved slowly and said, "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." He raised his eyebrows. "Military, huh? That doesn't mean you're above the law." She replied in a calm voice, "I never said I was." Suddenly, Sergeant Reynolds told her to get out of the car. Simone was surprised. "Can you tell me why, sir?" she asked politely. She wasn't being rude. She just wanted to understand. But Reynolds didn't like that. He reached for the door handle and opened her door himself. Simone stayed calm. She reached for her phone and pressed the record button. "This interaction is being documented," she said softly. The red recording light on her phone blinked. The officer hesitated for a second. He wasn't expecting that. But he didn't stop. Simone stepped out of the car. She stood tall. Her back was straight. She wasn't angry. She wasn't scared. She was steady, like a soldier ready for inspection. Reynolds told her to do a field sobriety test. She followed all the steps. Walk in a straight line, check. Stand on one foot, check. Follow the flashlight with your eyes, check. She passed every part with no problem. She didn't stumble. She didn't slur her words. She didn't act confused. Still, Sergeant Reynolds gave her a ticket. He said it was for failure to maintain lane. Simone took the ticket quietly. She didn't argue. She got back in her car and drove away, but she didn't forget. Sergeant Reynolds thought it was over. Just another traffic stop. Just another boring night. He didn't know who Simone really was. He drove back to the station and laughed with another officer. "Some federal lady tried to show off," he said. "Acted like she was somebody important. Flashed her ID like it meant something." "What was her name?" the other officer asked. "Simone Carter or something?" The other officer's face changed. He wasn't laughing anymore. "You mean Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter, the woman who gave that leadership talk at the academy? She's got a Bronze Star. 2 deployments. She runs operations at the base near here." Reynolds shrugged. "So? Doesn't matter. On the road I make the rules." But he was wrong. Simone wasn't just any driver. She had spent 22 years in the military. She had trained soldiers. She had gone to war zones. She had led missions and saved lives. And now she was thinking about every young soldier who had ever faced unfair treatment, every civilian who didn't know their rights, every black woman who stayed silent just to stay safe. Simone decided she was not going to stay silent. That night, after reaching home, Simone wrote everything down, every word he said, every step of what happened. She saved the video from her phone. The next morning, she called her lawyer. Together, they filed a formal complaint, not just with the local police department, but also with the Office of the Inspector General. Simone wasn't yelling. She wasn't posting on the internet. She was building her case quietly, with facts and video proof. The system had ignored people like her before, but she had power, she had rank, she had experience. And this time, the system was going to listen, Sergeant. Reynolds still thought nothing would happen. He had given out tickets like this before. Complaints had been filed before. They never went anywhere. But a few days later, he got a surprise in the mail, a thick envelope from Riverbend Civil Court. Inside was a formal civil rights complaint. Plaintiff, Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter. Charges, unlawful detainment, abuse of power and intimidation. Now things were different. Reynolds walked into the police station. People looked at him differently. They didn't laugh or smile like they used to. His captain called him into the office. "We need to talk," he said. Reynolds rolled his eyes. "The lady's just playing victim." The captain looked serious. "She's not playing. She's a lieutenant colonel, combat veteran. She has the entire stop on video. 2 angles. "So what?" Reynolds said. "I didn't arrest her. I didn't hurt her. You treated her like a criminal. You never gave a real reason. You ordered her out without cause." Reynolds didn't know what to say. The silence was heavy. Meanwhile, Simone went back to work. She didn't talk about it much. She didn't post online. She didn't yell. She trained her team. She helped her soldiers. She showed up every day like she always did, but behind the scenes, she was getting ready. Her lawyer was building the case. The complaint was strong. The video was clear, and Simone stayed calm because she knew what was coming, and this time she wasn't standing alone. It had been 5 days since Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter was pulled over. The sky was cloudy that morning. Simone stood outside the courthouse in her military uniform. Her posture was tall, her hands were calm, but inside her heart a storm was growing. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every quiet voice that had been ignored, every tired man who got pulled over for looking suspicious, every woman who was told to stay calm while being mistreated. This time the silence would break. Simone walked into the Riverbend Civil Court building with her lawyer, Ms. Gloria Nash, a tough and smart black woman who had been fighting for justice for over 15 years. They stepped into the office and placed the thick folder on the clerk's desk. "Civil rights complaint," Gloria said clearly, "against Sergeant David Reynolds." The clerk took the folder and read the first page. His eyes widened. He looked up at Simone, then looked back down, suddenly more serious. "We'll process this today," he said quickly. The folder had a video from Simone's phone that recorded the entire stop, a second video from the SUV's dashboard camera, Simone's military ID and paperwork proving her position, a timeline of the stop, word for word, a list of her achievements and her spotless record, a letter from a psychologist showing the emotional toll, and finally, a simple, strong statement. "I was not pulled over for what I did. I was pulled over for what I looked like. My rank didn't matter, my calm didn't matter, my dignity didn't matter, and that should never happen to anyone." Simone didn't post on social media, but someone in the courthouse leaked the story. By the next morning, local news stations were calling. One reporter even showed up at Simone's home. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, is it true that you're suing?" A Riverbend police officer. Simone didn't shout, she didn't smile, she just said, "Yes, it is true." Then she closed her door, but the story didn't stop there. By that evening, national media had picked it up. Decorated military officer sues police after traffic stop. Lieutenant Colonel says, "Enough is enough." People on Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok started talking. Section 3. The courtroom. The big day had come. The courtroom was cold and quiet, with long wooden benches and a tall judge's seat at the front. The walls were pale grey, but the moment felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter walked in with her head held high. She wore her military uniform, polished and perfect, and walked as if 1,000 voices were walking beside her. Everyone turned to look. Some people whispered. Some stared with wide eyes. But Simone didn't blink. This was the day the truth would speak. Two sides of the room. On the left side of the courtroom sat Simone, her lawyer Gloria Nash, and a team of civil rights supporters who believed in her. On the right side sat Sergeant David Reynolds, his lawyer, and a few officers from the Riverbend Police Department. Reynolds looked different now. No badge, no uniform, just a grey suit and eyes that avoided contact. Behind them sat people from all over the city. Some were curious, some were angry, and some were quietly praying that justice would finally win. The judge enters, a loud voice said, "All rise." Everyone stood up. The judge walked in. Her name was Judge Margaret Hill, an older black woman with short silver hair and glasses that looked too big for her face, but her voice strong, firm, calm like a mountain. "You may be seated," she said. Then the trial began. Simone takes the stand. The first witness was Simone. She sat in the chair, raised her right hand, and promised to tell the truth. The courtroom went silent. Her lawyer asked the first question. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, can you describe what happened on March 2nd?" Simone took a deep breath. "I was driving home. A police car pulled behind me, lights on, no reason. I stopped. I stayed calm. I gave my ID. I followed every rule. But still, I was ordered out of my vehicle. I was not told why. I was treated like a threat, even when I showed respect." Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She just told the truth. Then the video played for the courtroom to see. Everyone watched Sergeant Reynolds yank open her door. Everyone heard his cold voice. Everyone saw Simone sit still, say, "Yes, sir," and never raise her voice. The courtroom stayed quiet. No one could look away. Cross-examination. Then Reynolds' lawyer stood up. He tried to poke holes in her story. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, were you speeding?" "No." "Did you act nervous?" "No, I acted calm." "Then why do you think you were pulled over?" Simone looked him straight in the eye. "Because I was a black woman, driving a clean SUV, wearing no fear. And that made me a threat to someone who couldn't control his own power." Even some jury members nodded quietly. Sergeant Reynolds speaks. Next, Sergeant Reynolds took the stand. He looked uncomfortable. He pulled at his collar. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone," he began. He talked about his years of service, the stress of the job, the number of stops he'd done. He said, "She didn't roll down the window fast enough. I thought something might be wrong." Simone's lawyer stood up. "Did she yell at you?" "No." "Did she refuse to give you her ID?" "No." "Did you see a weapon?" "No." "Then why did you pull her out of the car?" Reynolds paused, then said, "I made a judgment call." Gloria Nash stepped forward slowly. "And was that judgment based on fear or bias?" Reynolds said nothing. The room got even quieter. The final arguments, after days of witnesses, videos, and expert opinions, it was time for closing statements. First, Simone's lawyer. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gloria said, walking slowly in front of the jury, This case is not just about one stop. It's about the pattern. It's about the feeling that some people can do anything in uniform and others are never safe, no matter how calm they act or how hard they've worked. Lieutenant. Colonel Carter served this country. She led troops. She earned medals, but on that day her skin spoke louder than her uniform. And if we do not speak back with fairness, with truth, then we are part of the silence that hurts us all. She sat down. Then Reynolds' lawyer stood up. This was a mistake, he said, but not an act of hate, not an act of cruelty. Officer Reynolds made a poor decision under pressure, that's all. But even as he spoke, his voice sounded tired, like he knew the jury had already seen too much. The verdict, the jury went away to talk. For 3 hours they discussed everything. Simone sat still, her hands folded, her eyes on the floor. Gloria whispered, "Whatever happens, you've already changed the world." Then the door opened. The jury returned. They handed a paper to the judge. Judge Hill read it slowly, then looked up. "In the case of Carter vs. Reynolds," she said, "we find in favor of Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter." The room exploded. Some clapped. Some cried. Simone didn't move. She just closed her eyes, took one long breath and whispered, "Thank you, God." After the trial, the city was ordered to pay Simone damages for emotional harm, suspend Sergeant Reynolds for 1 year without pay, give new training to every police officer in Riverbend. But more important than the money or the punishment, people were listening now. A lawmaker in another city introduced a bill called Carter's Law to protect citizens during traffic stops. Schools started teaching students how to record safely and report unfair treatment. And police departments across the country watched the case and started asking questions they had never asked before. The legacy months. Later, Simone stood on a stage at a military conference. She held a medal in her hand, awarded not for war, but for courage in peace. She looked at the crowd and said, "True bravery isn't just on the battlefield. Sometimes it's in the courtroom. Sometimes it's in the back of a police car. Sometimes it's in the silence you refuse to accept." One more voice. A few weeks later, Simone got a letter. It was from a 10-year-old girl named Nia. It read, "Dear Lieutenant Carter, I saw your video. I saw how you were calm and brave. I want to be like you. When I grow up, I want to wear a uniform and stand for what is right. Love." Nia Simone smiled. She folded the letter and placed it next to her medals, because that, more than the money, more than the victory, was what truly mattered. Some supported her, some didn't, but one thing was clear: everyone was watching now. Riverbend Police Department didn't know what to do. For years, complaints had come and gone. Most were forgotten. Most people didn't have video. Most didn't have lawyers. Most didn't have rank. But Simone Carter wasn't like most people. They held a press conference. Chief Alan Monroe stood at a podium. "We take these allegations seriously," he said. "An internal review will begin immediately." But Simone's lawyer already knew what that meant. Gloria leaned over to Simone as they watched the press conference on TV. "Translation," she whispered. "They're trying to buy time and make people forget." Simone nodded. "Then we won't. Let them." While the news spread, Sergeant Reynolds was in trouble. His captain told him to turn in his badge temporarily. "You're not fired," he said, "but stay home until this is over." Reynolds was angry. "I didn't do anything wrong," he shouted, but the video told a different story. Everyone could see how he opened the door without cause, how Simone stood calmly, how he acted like he had all the power, even though she had done nothing, and worst of all, how bored he looked, as if stopping her was a game. A week later, Simone was invited to speak at a high school. The students had heard about the story and wanted to meet her. She stood in front of 200 teenagers in a gymnasium. She wore her uniform. She looked them in the eyes, and then she spoke. I fought in 2 wars. I trained soldiers who became heroes. I wore this uniform with pride, but last week none of that mattered, because to one officer I was just a problem to control, not a person, not a patriot, just a target. But here's the truth," she continued. "Power without respect is abuse, and silence in the face of abuse is agreement. That's why I'm speaking, not just for me, but for you." The students stood and clapped. Some even cried. A teacher hugged her afterward and whispered, "Thank you for fighting back. My son was stopped like that last year. He didn't have a camera, he didn't have a lawyer, he just had fear." Across Riverbend, something began to shift. People who had never spoken up before started to share stories. A delivery driver named Paul said he was stopped 3 times in 1 week. A school teacher named Rosa said she was told she looked too nervous behind the wheel. A teenage boy named Jalen said he was pulled out of his car just for driving his mom's new sedan. Simone read every story online. She cried. Then she got back to work. She started writing letters to lawmakers. She spoke to police reform groups. She offered to give training sessions to police departments on how to treat citizens with dignity. Some accepted, some ignored her, but she kept showing up. Then came the next big moment. The city's legal department sent Simone an offer, a settlement. They would pay her a large sum of money if she agreed to drop the case, stay quiet about it, never speak about the officer again. Simone read the paper carefully. Then she slid it back across the table and said, "No." The room went quiet. Her lawyer smiled, because that was the moment they knew. This wasn't about money. This was about making sure it never happened again. That evening, Simone made her first public video. She sat at her kitchen table, no fancy lights, no dramatic music, just her phone. She looked straight into the camera. "If I, a woman with power, respect and service to this country, can be treated like this, what do you think happens to the man with no title, to the girl with no camera, to the mother who just wants to get home? We are not enemies. We are not threats. We are citizens, and it's time we were treated like it." The video went viral. Within 24 hours, it had 1 million views. 2 months later, the court sent a letter. A trial date had been set. The case of Carter versus Reynolds would be heard in federal court. Everyone would be watching. It would no longer be just a local story. It would be a national conversation. And as Simone folded the letter and placed it on her desk, she whispered to herself, "I didn't ask for this fight, but now that I'm in it, I'm going to finish it." The big day had come. The courtroom was cold and quiet, with long wooden benches and a tall judge's seat at the front. The walls were pale gray, but the moment felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. Lieutenant Colonel Simone Carter walked in with her head held high. She wore her military uniform, polished and perfect, and walked as if 1,000 voices were walking beside her. Everyone turned to look. Some people whispered. Some stared with wide eyes. But Simone didn't blink. This was the day the truth would speak. On the left side of the courtroom sat Simone, her lawyer Gloria Nash, and a team of civil rights supporters who believed in her. On the right side sat Sergeant David Reynolds, his lawyer, and a few officers from the Riverbend Police Department. Reynolds looked different now. No badge, no uniform, just a grey suit and eyes that avoided contact. Behind them sat people from all over the city. Some were curious, some were angry, and some were quietly praying that justice would finally win. A loud voice said, "All rise." Everyone stood up. The judge walked in. Her name was Judge Margaret Hill, an older black woman with short silver hair and glasses that looked too big for her face, but her voice, strong, firm, calm like a mountain. "You may be seated," she said. Then the trial began. The first witness was Simone. She sat in the chair, raised her right hand, and promised to tell the truth. The courtroom went silent. Her lawyer asked the first question. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, can you describe what happened on March 2nd? Simone took a deep breath. I was driving home. A police car pulled behind me, lights on, no reason. I stopped. I stayed calm. I gave my ID. I followed every rule. But still, I was ordered out of my vehicle. I was not told why. I was treated like a threat even when I showed respect. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She just told the truth. Then the video played for the courtroom to see. Everyone watched Sergeant Reynolds yank open her door. Everyone heard his cold voice. Everyone saw Simone sit still, say, "Yes, sir," and never raise her voice. The courtroom stayed quiet. No one could look away. Then Reynolds' lawyer stood up. He tried to poke holes in her story. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, were you speeding?" "No." "Did you act nervous?" "No, I acted calm." "Then why do you think you were pulled over?" Simone looked him straight in the eye. "Because I was a black woman, driving a clean SUV, wearing no fear, and that made me a threat to someone who couldn't control his own power." Even some jury members nodded quietly. Next, Sergeant Reynolds took the stand. He looked uncomfortable. He pulled at his collar. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone," he began. He talked about his years of service, the stress of the job, the number of stops he'd done. He said, "She didn't roll down the window fast enough. I thought something might be wrong." Simone's lawyer stood up. "Did she yell at you?" "No." "Did she refuse to give you her ID?" "No." "Did you see a weapon?"